Good morning, and welcome to the 66th Alfred M. Landon Lecture on Public Issues. It is my pleasure to introduce to you this morning the members of the Platform Party. First, Mr. Edward Seaton, who is chair of the Landon Patrons and has been exceedingly instrumental in attracting to Kansas State University our speaker this morning. Mr. Seaton. As many of you know, Mr. Seaton is Vice President and Program Chairman of the Inter-American Press Association, to which President Duarte spoke yesterday in California. I would like to have you meet the chairperson of our Faculty Senate, Dr. Jerry Freeman. Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. Mr. Ken Hines, our Student Body President. And on your left, Dr. Charles Reagan, who is chair of the Landon series. Dr. Reagan. This morning we are honored to have with us the President of the Republic of El Salvador, Jose Napoleon Duarte. President Duarte was graduated in 1948 from the University of Notre Dame with a degree in civil engineering, and has subsequently studied in the areas of political economy, political ideology, and public and municipal administration. He served as a professor of civil engineering at the University of El Salvador and has worked as a civil engineer involved with many enterprises in El Salvador and in Venezuela. President Duarte was one of the founders of the Christian Democrat Party in El Salvador in 1960, and served as its first Secretary General from 1960 to 1964. He was elected mayor of San Salvador in 1964 and was re-elected twice, in 1966 and in 1968. Following the controversial 1972 presidential election in El Salvador, Mr. Duarte was forced to leave his country. He returned in October of 1979 to become president of a new government. A newly formed constitutional assembly was called for, and it called for elections. And Mr. Duarte was nominated for the presidency by the Christian Democrat Party in 1983 and elected by popular vote in May of 1984. He is the first civilian president chosen by the democratic election in El Salvador since 1931. This morning he will address the topic, the Salvadoran democratic process. President Duarte.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Honorable Mr. President of the University of Kansas State, members of the Landon Lecture Series, and members of the board, student body, ladies and gentlemen. I had prepared for this morning a written speech which expresses the sentiments that I have concerning democracy and concerning the process of my country. But in my way down, I started to think over and I said, I cannot waste this beautiful opportunity to be back in the university, to remember my Notre Dame student time, and to remember my life in the school conditions, to try to explain the people of the university what happened in La Palma. I think that what we made in La Palma explain what's happening in the whole country. It gives an idea of the process of confrontation of ideologies. And in a forum like this, you have to excuse my lack of knowledge of the political science theories, but this is the way I feel it, this is the way I see it. And therefore, let me forget for a moment this written speech, and I will try to explain what I think, what is my concepts of what happened in my country, and what is the concept, in my opinion, of the left and the revolutionary people, and what are the controversies between these two concepts. And then you will see why I have asked for this La Palma meeting, and you will also see why I made this offer of peace to my country. For that, I'll go back to school and I use the blackboard. And I thank you for this opportunity. So let's see what I can do with this blackboard here. I want to say another remark, and this is that this is the first time that I'm going to try to present this. So I might make mistakes on the presentation, and especially on the language, but you have to excuse me. And any theory, can you hear me well? No? No? So we have a problem. Can we take one of these and... You see, the problem is that we have a television microphone here, and all right, this is as long as we can get. Oh. It seems like I had to go back and read my paper. There's no extra line. All right. Yeah, sure. Why don't we? All right. 1, 2, 1, 2. Huh? Now? Good. Now. Everything for the good old Kansas State University. All right. Now here we go. This round thing is supposed to be the ideology, any ideology of any force. And this is the reality, any reality. Any force, political force or ideological force, always tries to change the realities into what they think is the ideal. And for that they establish a strategy in which they want to move this reality into their ideology. This is for everybody. So the communists, in 1970, they started to analyze the reality and tried to present a strategy to move this reality to what they thought. And they established then the system of violence, the popular prolonged war strategy. They used the violence in order to destabilize this reality, who was at that moment inserted into the capitalistic, and here I'm going to use as an academic word, a liberal capitalistic structure. By liberal, I don't mean your American concept of liberal, but I mean the European concept of liberal, which is a conservative. So the conservative groups had a real control of all the reality of El Salvador. And in 1970, the communists decided to confront this situation. Obviously, there was other ideologies who wanted also to change this reality. But for many years, the people who controlled the reality, who was the rightist groups, decided to eliminate all of them. And they established an hegemony of power. This hegemony of power was based on a political party, the official party, the government, the absolute control of the government, the absolute control of the economy, the absolute control of the army, the military people, and the support of the international forces. And this is why many, many years ago I said that the United States was living in democracy, but it was exporting dictatorship because they were supporting dictators. So these forces were the only available and possible forces in the country. They tried to eliminate everybody else. And they established the dictatorship for 50 years. So this is a very strong force, and the reality was absolutely controlled by these forces. So this is the reason why, since there were no other means, the communists thought that there was the moment to confront this reality. So they established the method, the strategy, to obtain a goal. And their goal was the violent revolution. But this is how it started, the whole process of political violence. But when this scheme has already started, there was a group of military people who analyzed the situation and thought that they had to dismantle this hegemony of power. And by dismantling this, they would start changing the structure. So they created another concept, the democratic revolution. And they established a strategy, democracy. So they started to dismantle this and make the coup d'etat. That's 1979 October. And they eliminated the official party. They eliminated the concentration of power in the government. They started a change in the army. And at the same moment, because of the conditions of the policies of the United States, there was also a change in the international situation. So there was a change here too. The only thing left was the economical power. So this means the reason why this democratic revolution and this strategy meant the reforms. The agrarian reform, the bank reform, in order to reduce the power of these forces, the political power, not taking away their money, but taking away their power. So the strategy of the concentration of the rightist force was diminished. So that made it possible, the realities, to start moving away from this concept. And of course, obviously, the extreme left, by according to their strategy and by according to their violent concept, started to move that a little bit in that direction, but also the reforms started to move. What happened was that the reality moved. Instead of moving in the direction of the communist ideology, it came up to a point of a new position of the reality, very in the direction of the democratic realities, because the right started to hold back. And so they reorganized this structure by creating a political party of the extreme right, which is called Arena. They created a provisional government in which they had a very important control through the National Assembly. They strengthened their economical control, and they created the death squads as to replace the actions of repression in the country. And they even came to the States to obtain international support. So the right created this structure in order to act against the communists and also against the democratic solution, because they were against the reforms. At the same time, the communists attack the rightist groups, but they didn't like the idea of having a democratic solution, so they also attack the democratic solution. So you see, this is a triangle. And in the middle was the reality. And it started to move. And it moved in the direction of democracy. This is important to understand. So, according to my theory, I believe that at this moment there is a definite move, a definite change between the old reality and the new reality. But the communists did not change their strategy. They still think that the violent revolution and the strategy of violence and the popular prolonged war is the solution. So they wrote a new document in 1980 and in 1983. And all are based on two things: the anti-oligarchy and the anti-imperialism. So there is a difference between these three documents, but the three are based on this concept. So they are not changing their method. They are not changing their instruments. They're only changing their presentation. But the reality has changed. So, in the United Nations, I presented my offer of peace by saying that the people who have lived outside of El Salvador, the groups of the left who have been moving around the world, have forgotten that this has happened in the last years. And therefore, the only ones who knows this is the commander of the guerrillas who is in the mountains. And when they come down to the town, they expect to be received as heroes, but they're not, because the reality is different. Because the people had made a different decision, a decision that the representatives of the FMLN and FDR outside of the country don't even know, or they don't want to recognize it. But this is a reality. So I said to them, you are anti-historical, because now what you have to do is to establish a new strategy concerning the new reality against your ideology. And I said to the right that they're also anti-historical, because they are not considering that the only possibility to solve the problem is not to hold around their own concept, but to lead the way a little so that they could try to establish against the new reality, establish a new policy. And this is the reason why I say that I am offering to change the concept of hate for the concept of tolerance. And this is the reason why I say, let's try to find a way in which we all understand each other, so that part of these people could move closer, so that, and part of these people, or these people, will move closer, so that we could form a very important shell to attract the reality closer to democracy. This is my presentation of the at La Palma idea. What did the left say? They started by saying that nothing has changed, absolutely nothing, and that the reality that they see is the same that it was in 1970. And that there are 5 points, they say, that they believe are the basic points in which the reality has not changed. So they spend just about 2.5 hours talking, trying to explain to us, and we let them do, of why they believe that this reality has not changed. They say the reforms and the economical situation are still on the control of the oligarchy. And therefore, nothing has changed at this moment. The reforms, they say, have not changed anything. The economy will need 16 years to rebuild, and it's absolutely destroyed. They say the political situation, we don't believe on the elections, we don't accept the result of the elections, we don't accept your presidency, because we were not in the election process. And since we were not there, we don't believe on the pluralistic concept. And the international, they say, you are absolutely dependent of the United States. You are not nationalistic. You are not free. And therefore, we believe that you are under the control of the policies of the United States, and the United States directs your doings, and you, Duarte, are only a puppet of the United States. And everything was based then here on the imperialistic concept. But finally they came up on the war analysis. And here they say that what it happened is that there is an insurgent concept who is a product of the strategy of not changing the realities. The only solution is to change it by the violent revolution, and therefore it's absolutely moral, the actions of the insurgency. And against this insurgency, the army had presented a contra-insurgency. So the war is nothing else but an escalation between the insurgency and the contra-insurgency. This is what they presented as the theory, and therefore they say your theory is not correct because nothing has changed. The absolute control of the society is under the hands of the right and the extreme right, and the reality is the same. So our concept, our ideology, and our strategy is correct. Our answers to that, we say the reforms. Up to this moment, 30% of the land of the country is in the hands of the campesinos. Before, there were somewhere around 300 people who owned 1/3 of the most productive land of our country. Now, there is at least somewhere around 200,000 campesinos who own that land. So, you are forgetting that now the banks, who were in the hands of the 14 families, are now in the hands of the government. And that the credits that before were given to friends around the 14 families now are given to the campesinos and the cooperatives. Just to give you an example, before, somewhere around 300 million colones were given as credits, agricultural credits, to a group of somewhere around 500 people. Now, this same amount, 300 millions, are handled by 300 cooperatives. This is a change. There's no question about it. And everybody knows it. There is no question that at this moment, the power of the economical forces had diminished. And that even though they're still strong, they have not the influence that they had before. Politically, we say that there is a big change. A change in creating parties, a change in making elections. And they say that the elections were not valid because they did not participate. And I say you did participate. When you said that you will oppose to the elections, when you decided to get your guns out to stop the people to go and to vote, when you shoot and the people went down to the floor because you didn't want them to vote. You were participating. You were participating in the negative system. But at the end, the people rise up, stayed in line, and went to vote. And there are 1,000 newspaper people as witnesses all over the world. And there were 250 representatives of people from all the countries who went there to see this election. And it's not only one election, it's 3 elections on the road with the same concept and the same attitude. So the legitimacy of the political result is undebatable. Now, your concept of pluralism, and they said, we believe that it cannot be pluralism without us. But they also say, in order to have a real pluralism, it has to be a popular pluralism without the right. So I said, so you want a pluralism with one side out and replace the extreme right by the extreme left. That is not pluralism. Pluralism is to include all and to give all the right to be there, the right and the left, and the center, and all the parties, and all the factors. So you are absolutely wrong on this concept. International, there is a change. Before, everybody knew that the government was responsible for all the factors of violence in the country. And now, the whole world is conscious that the government is doing their effort in order to change the reality. And of course, there's no question that we are at this moment dependent on the help of the political and economical, of the economical and of the military aid of the United States. That is no question about it. We know it. But that dependency is not only on one side. You, commanders, are also dependent on the aid of Russia, Nicaragua, and Cuba. So we both sides are in dependency. So this is not an argument. And the third is the word which has something to do with the dependency. If you insist that there is no change in the reality and that by not changing the reality, the insurgency is valid, then the contra-insurgency is a very natural thing. But the problem is that this insurgency has escalated into the warfare. And this escalation made the contra-insurgency to escalate. So this thing kept on going higher and higher. So they say, we believe that before the army was a national army, and that it has passed from the national army to a contra-insurgency army. And now is moving into a puppet army. Puppet of the United States. The United States tell them what to do and how to do things. This is their argument. And I said, but you're doing the same. Cuba tells you what to do. Cuba plans whatever you have to have and the arms that you have to have. So you see, the war problem and the contra-insurgency and the insurgency is nothing else but the result of your concept of violence and your concept of understanding that there is no change on the reality. So they say, the solution is simple. Eliminate the counterinsurgency, and then immediately the insurgency will disappear. And I say, another mistake, a historical mistake. Because you started by saying that the insurgency was a product of the reality. And now you say that the insurgency is a product of the counterinsurgency. This is not true. So I said to them, you started the escalation of the armed forces. In the beginning, the army had arms who were bought somewhere around 1950, 1960. They had rifles, G3 Mark. And they had ammunition 20 years old. But you started obtaining new rifles, found, Khalil, and machine guns. That make it obligatory to the army to have more arms to control this unbalanced situation. But then you came up and have more sophisticated arms. The Russians and Cubans gave you special grenades who were using rifles. Then they gave you special Chinese rockets. And finally, they have gave you this non-reversible guns that the army of El Salvador never had before. And today we're suspicious that they have special rockets, earth to air, that they might use to destroy the Air Force. So the escalation has come from the insurgency area, and this is the reason why we need the help to obtain the arms capable of controlling this. But what is more important is neither the insurgency groups, neither the government groups have a capacity to buy those arms and to buy those ammunition. These are billions, millions of dollars. And neither the commanders and the guerrillas, and neither the army has the capacity, the economical capacity to have it. So this makes this war a definite dependency on the international foreign forces. And this takes the problem away from El Salvador. And this is the reason why I presented a nationalistic proposition, a proposition in which the problem has to be understood that it has two dimensions, the national dimension and the international dimension. The national dimension, which it had root on this structure that I explained to you. And the international dimension of dependency, which we do not have any control. So actually, this is the reason I said why I have presented the guerrillas with this offer of peace. This is the reason why I made a strategy of going all through the world, talking to the Congress in the United States, talking to the government in the United States, talking to the countries in Europe, talking to the countries in Latin America, because I needed a shield to protect this reality against actions that might try to destroy internationally these efforts of reality. And if I can get to understand that the two extreme positions, a polarization position between the revolutionary violence and the actions of the death squads, I need protection against this too. And for that, I need an army to understand that it has to protect this reality against the death squads and against the violent actions of the extreme left. This is the reason why I did not start the dialogue immediately after taking office. I had to work before in order to get this scheme and to get the people back in the idea of trying to solve the problem in the democratic way. And when I did that, and when I thought that I had everything ready, then I made the offer of peace of the United Nations. And the offer of peace then is try to get the new strategy of the left, move to an area closer to the democratic revolution, so that the democratic revolution when strengthened with the concept of your so-called effort of the social justice of the people. And I also call on the right for a dialogue to come up here and strengthen the concept of the private initiative and the economic, because between the three, we can form the forces capable of stabilizing the democratic process. They tried to say, no, we don't believe in this. We believe that what you are trying to do is to take time. And here is the main thing. They say, we believe that there is only one way, a global solution. A global solution, which means to obtain everything, to have negotiations in which they will be able to have their revolution absolutely under changing everything immediately. I said, all right, now what you want is paradise. Paradise today. And that is impossible in any society. What we are presenting is a process. So the actual difference between the concept of the guerrillas, the ideological concept, is that they want a global solution, which means that let's negotiate, let me, the violent revolution, participate in the government, have a control in the government, have a control in the army, destroy all the factors, the 5 factors that I mentioned, try to make the country free from the control of the United States. Let's have friends, negotiations and relations with friends like Russia and all. And by having that, we will have a complete control on the conditions in order to have the changes of structure. This is the global solution they presented. And I said, that is impossible. What we need is a process. And for that, we need to understand these changes of structure. And they said, we believe that there is no change on the structure. And because there is no change of the structure, we believe that your theory of the process is only, how would you call that in English? Maquillaje, isn't it? Huh? Makeup. It's only a makeup solution. It's only a makeup solution. And therefore, there is no real proof. And I said, the best proof is that you have entered into the country, had gone through the whole country, have gone to La Palma, and you are now sitting down here in front of the president. This is a reality, and this is a change. You could not have done this 5 months ago. You can only do it because there is a new concept, a new idea, and a new reality. This is the moment in which I said, we cannot come out of this room without something
to tell our people who is outside waiting. We cannot discourage our people. We have to give them faith that there is still an opportunity for peace. So they accepted, and we signed this communication that we presented to the world, in which it says that we will form a mechanics and or a committee to study all these offers and to study all this, to try to look for a solution. And second, that we will try to humanize the concepts of war. This is what happened in La Palma. Okay. All right. I think that with this information, you have now clear my points of view concerning the two basic confrontation, ideological confrontation, in which there is not a polarization between the extreme right and the extreme left in our country, but a tripolarization. There are three forces trying to change the reality. The extreme right trying to maintain it, the extreme left trying to make the violent revolution, and us. And when I mean us, I mean everybody who believes in democracy and is working in the democratic line. That includes other parties too, who are working with different points of view on the democratic revolution. When they ask me who's winning the war, I always said, I know that who's losing the war are those who want violence, and who is winning the war are those who want democracy and who want peace. This, I think that it gives you an idea. And now I will put myself into your hands for any questions concerning my country. Thank you.
Good teacher. A good teacher.
Thank you very much. Sí, pero no tengo pañuelo. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Mr. President, there are many messages in that applause, and one of the messages is that we at Kansas State University deeply respect and admire a good teacher. We will devote about 15 minutes to questions, and we have microphones to your left and to your right. May I have the first question, please? And I would, again, ask your cooperation and that the questions be concise and to the point.
President Duarte, I'm sure we all greatly admire your peace initiative and the power of hope to succeed. But I'd like to bring to your attention information that appeared in last Friday's Manhattan Mercury that makes us wonder whether it will. There was a report based upon an article in the Washington Post based upon interviews with high Pentagon officials, which says that several hundred U.S. troops are scheduled to participate in early December with Honduran and Salvadoran soldiers in a maneuver called King's Guard along the Honduran-Salvadoran border. And the plan calls for activities to take place on El Salvador soil, which would be the first time U.S. maneuvers in Honduras have spilled over into El Salvador. And the same Pentagon officials say the aim of this American presence in El Salvador is to help the government win its war against the leftist guerrillas. Now, you've said that you would not want ever American troops to be in El Salvadoran soil, and you've said that a military victory against the guerrillas is impossible. Therefore, you've gone to negotiate, to the road of negotiations. So I'd like to know whether you've changed your mind on that, or if not, then who does rule in El Salvador, President Duarte or the Pentagon?
All right. Thank you very much for your question. Let me say categorically, there won't be any troops of the United States in El Salvador while I am president of El Salvador. And this is because I believe that the solution is not measured on war dimensions. When you see me explaining all this, you saw that I mentioned the war as part of the whole thing. This is a political war, an ideological war, an economical war, a social war, an international war, and a military war. So the military factor is only one of them, not all of them. And the first one that it has to be diminished is the military factor, the violent factor. Therefore, I believe that that can only be done if we in El Salvador look for confronting the causes of this violent process. And this is the reason why I said, and you can read it in the document of La Palma, that we have to humanize the violent process. But for me, it has two meanings. It's humanizing the war, but also, and more important than that, humanizing the system of the country. Because if we humanize the system, then we take away the causes of violence and the causes of war. This is the reason why I don't want to increment the causes. I don't want to increment the conditions of this confrontation. Second, you asked me a question, who's governing the country? Let me clearly say that in El Salvador, I am the president and I take the full and absolute responsibility of what happened in my country. I will not permit anybody to put their hands inside my country. Concerning the maneuvers, I think that every country has its own position, and there's no question that the strategical line of the security forces of the United States have moved from the coast of the Rio Grande down to the line of Panama. And that Central America, whether we like it or not, whether you like it or not, has become a very important area which has a specific task and the possibilities either to destabilize your country or and the national security of the United States. And for that reason, the United States has taken its own protection, and it moves these forces in the area. They have fleet moving down in the Pacific and the Atlantic and the Gulf to get a line of protection between Cuba and Central America, a line of protection for the United States. And that is correct, it's acceptable. They need to help the countries who are also in threat from other countries. And there is no question that Nicaragua is the center of the threat and exporting revolutions to other countries, and that Honduras is having threat from Nicaragua. And Honduras and the United States have a signed treaty of defense between them. So I see no reason why they should join in this effort of having this process of controlling or making maneuvers in their territory to train the Honduras army. What is the presence of El Salvador army on these maneuverings? This is to take the advantage. If you offer me to come to the university free to get to receive classes, I'll come, because that will be nice to me, because I'll learn. So if the United States offer me the opportunity to train my people without expending any money, I'll do it. So I send troops to Honduras to see if I get some experience and some training free. That, I think, is also honest. But what I want to make sure is that everybody will understand that one thing is to obtain training, obtain aid, obtain advisors, and for including that, limited to certain areas. For example, I have said that the maximum advisors that I accept in my country up to this moment is 55 advisors. And if they want to change that figure, they have to convince me. And up to this moment, nobody has convinced me to change the figure. So I stick to this 55 figure. This is the way I believe that I have to have a control on this process. Now, we need aid. There's no question. I've proven to you that we cannot support a war on this escalation problem. And this is the reason why I have asked for aid. But don't mistake it. The people of the United States has been led to believe that the army of El Salvador has been working against the country, against the people. But now I can assure you that the army of my country is hand by hand with the people of my country defending democracy. And democracy is not a weak democracy. Democracy has to be strong, to be stable. So I want a strong democratic army to defend the democracy of my country so that we can stabilize this reality and move in the direction of peace and democracy.
We'll have one more question. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
Out there.
My question, Mr. President,
All right. Yes.
has to do with your idea that the reality has changed in your country in the past year, and with your concept of pluralism. In your interview in the last issue of Playboy, you said that 40,000 people are dead, it happened in the past, and that's it. There's nothing to investigate. And you appointed as your Attorney General a man named Jose Guerrero, a member of ARENA, one of the main terrorist organizations of your country. You appointed as Minister for Public Security Mr. Lopez Huila, former head of the National Guard, and another source of death squad. And you named as your Army Chief of Staff Colonel Landon, who ordered the bombing of the civilian population of Tenancingo. My question is, do these appointments mean that you approve of the kinds of activities that are being practiced, or do they mean that you do not, in fact, possess the political power to remove from the political structure of your country the forces of right-wing terror.
Good. We have to...
And why have you increased...
Well, wait a minute. Let's go one by one. Let's go one by one. I want to answer all your questions, but let's go in order so that I'll be able to answer you correctly. Would you give me the first question?
The first question is, do these appointments mean that you approve of the kind of activities that these individuals within the military are practicing? You appointed them, so... Mm-hmm.
All right. That I appointed the High Command, and that the actions of them are approved by me. Is that it? All right. Let me start saying that I am the commander, the general commander of the Army. And that whatever is done in the Army, it has to pass through me. But of course, I'm talking about humans, not gods. And somebody might make a mistake in the long line. So my responsibility is to stop whenever a mistake is made. For example, you were talking about the bombs in Tenancingo. I was not in government then when the Tenancingo was bombed. I have one example of that. There were 3 bombs dropped in Miramundo, and there were 2 houses blown up by these bombs. So when I learned this, immediately I prepared the instructives of how the Air Force will work from that moment on. So these instructions are being kept